Hey everybody, it's Molly Moynahan of The Teacher's Way and also several novels. One of the questions I get frequently from writers and also from non-writers is asking me about self-publishing, why I do or do not do it, and actually it's a great question. So I started out in writing novels and still writing novels with what we call brick and mortar publishing houses, which kind of gives you this attitude, I have to admit, about self-publishing, because it's kind of that idea that you were chosen and you had an editor, and it's also easier than self-publishing. But I self-published the first college admission essay book, handbook on writing. And the new one is just coming out. It's on my website, theteachersway.com, and that is self-published. So when I'm doing that, the sort of more academic, self-publishing seems like a good way to go. But with my novels, I prefer to have a publisher involved. But it's not always up to me. I have a new book, and it might not go anywhere. So it may end up being self-published. We'll see. It's pretty much an unanswerable question. I do have a friend who's very, very organized, who spends a lot of time, she actually documents, she doesn't spend a lot of time, but she actually writes down how many pages, how much time, I think pretty much on a daily basis. I don't do that at all. I tend to get up in the morning, get my coffee, and write for a few hours or an hour. Or less, or more. So it'd be really hard for me to figure out. In terms of years, it's usually about 3 years a book. Sometimes with feedback that I need to fill things in, but also sometimes it just takes 3 years. But I'm not sure how that breaks down in terms of hours. How do I get started is another great question. And I think again, I can only really speak from my experience. One thing that tends to happen to me is that a first line for a book will pop into my head. It happened with this last one, the one that I'm in the midst of trying to find an agent for, and then I have a new book that is set in 1977 that I'm writing now, and what came into my head was Son of Sam right away, because that's the year that he was shooting all those people. And because I wanted to set it at that time, I remembered actually something someone said to me, my oldest sister actually, about that, and the book just kind of went from there. So that's one way to go. Another way is possibly to just start. So how do you do that? Well, I have a number of writing exercises to get the words out. Also, it's the self-criticism that really makes you stop once you've started. So the good thing to do is to just keep going. How you do that can be a plan. Maybe you'll make an outline or know the beginning and the end. That's my usual thing, is knowing the beginning and the end. But otherwise, it is kind of butt in the chair. I forget which writer said that. And don't let yourself get distracted. Some people really think it's a good idea to turn off all their social media. And if they're working straight onto a computer, I have a tendency to longhand write and then also write on a computer. Another question I get sometimes is the issue around reading and writing. I became a writer because I was a reader. I read everything, every single thing in the house, anything I could find. And I also obsessed. There's this book, In Human Bondage, that was way up. My parents had books everywhere, but there was one shelf that clearly had all the sexy books. And In Human Bondage was up. Is it In Human Bondage? I still haven't read it. Was up on this shelf, and I just thought it sounded sexy. And so finally I got it down, and it was just absolutely ridiculously boring and hard. So I didn't find it erotic or anything like that. But basically I read everything. I read tons and tons of magazines. And my parents didn't read any magazines. They just read books. They read the New York Times every single day. New York Times was like the Bible, as my niece said recently. But I read 17, and I read Vogue, and I read all of these girl, beauty magazines that told you what to do. Meanwhile, we didn't have mirrors in the house practically, and my mom washed her hair with dishwashing detergent, and she never wore makeup. She's very, very beautiful, my mother, but so she got away with it. But she maybe would put lipstick on and maybe some mascara. I don't know. I don't think I ever saw her putting on makeup. But meanwhile, I'd read about this, how to get a perfect tan, which of course isn't good for you, but how to seduce a man, which at age 11 wasn't really on my agenda. But then I graduated to really wonderful literature. And actually I was reading wonderful literature all the way through. I read David Copperfield in 6th grade, and lots of Dickens and Jane Austen, and I had a babysitting job up in Maine that was pretty dull. At night we'd all read books, and the kid was asleep, and I'd sit there with the parents, and I would read a novel a week. Let me see what kind of things. Mostly 19th century British novels. I love Thomas Hardy. I read most of Thomas Hardy. The Brontes, love the Brontes. Who else? Modern Joyce Carol Oates, Margaret Drabble. I just read everything I could get my hands on. So I do think that reading's really important. Another thing I used to always get in reading was kind of what do you want out of your writing? And basically what I want from a reader is I want to make them cry and laugh and be completely immersed in the story I'm telling. And that's hard. It takes a lot of work to do that. I'm not a passive writer. I think the image I always have is someone getting grabbed by the jugular. I had a friend who told me she spent an entire weekend after reading my novel, Stone Garden, crying on the couch. I kind of ruined her weekend. I like to hear that. And otherwise, having readers is just the greatest compliment in the world. I just feel really amazed that anyone would want to stay with anything that I have to say in words. And for that, I feel like I have the best job in the world. Thank you. And if you want to find out more, go to mmwriting.com, or you can go to theteachersway.com. I have a page on Facebook, The Teacher's Way, and I'd love to hear from you. And if you have any more questions or comments, it would be great to hear from you. Thanks.